Interviewing with fresh information on the Greenberg case is attorney Joe Podraza, who's been an advocate for the family all these many years. And Joe, there was a court decision today which was not in your favor to get a real investigation going into the Ellen Greenberg, quote, suicide, which you and others actually think was a murder. So what happened today in a nutshell?
Well, in a nutshell, Larry, before three judges, two decided that the parents have no right to speak for their daughter, who we claim was murdered, to try to vindicate her rights, while one in dissent, meaning was not in agreement with the other two, believed that the parents did have a right to speak for the daughter and to try to pursue and correct what has happened to date so that their daughter gets justice.
In layman's terms, what you were trying to do with this filing was to overturn the decision of the medical examiner, Marlon Osborne, his finding that it was a suicide, to overturn that and present evidence so it would be overturned, so it would be changed to either undetermined or a homicide, correct?
Basically, that's right. The only correction I would say, Larry, is originally that pathologist said it was a homicide because there were 20 stab wounds. Then, for reasons which we claim were improper, he changed it to suicide. And despite the magnitude of information we've shown to date saying that, hey, you were right the first time, he's refusing to change it back to homicide, sticking by suicide, which means then there is no crime and nothing's ever going to be done to investigate this claim.
Well, Joe, a peculiar contention here is that the judges that rejected it, at least 2 out of 3 rejected it, all 3 judges concluded that it was a flawed investigation, correct?
That's my reading of it, Larry. And I think it went beyond flawed. I think a few of them called it deeply disturbing, the failure of the investigation by the district attorney's office and the police department, as well as the medical examiner's office in Philadelphia.
Do these judges have any advice on how to get a real investigation, a competent, thorough, professional investigation going in the Greenberg case, even though they rejected your bid to have the medical examiner's conclusion overturned? They did point out that it wasn't a good investigation, but did they give any pointers on what to do to get a good investigation?
Well, 2 of the judges, the way they've ruled, have left it to those government officials, to their whim, to decide whether now, even reading this opinion and all of that information that's passed upon, whether they will decide to do an investigation or not. They haven't done it in 12 years. I'm not real optimistic. While the one in dissent, the judge in dissent, has said that the family can press this issue, and we're not just left to government officials deciding whether their actions are right and wrong all the time and are unassailable.
What are those government officials and agencies that did not do a good investigation?
Well, they're listed in this opinion. It's the Philadelphia Police Department, the district attorney's office, and the medical examiner's office in Philadelphia, including 3 pathologists, the then head of the pathology in Philadelphia and 2 assistants. All 3, by the way, are no longer with the medical examiner's office in Philadelphia, interestingly.
The Attorney General's office also had it before its office for a while, did it not?
They did. The case was referred to the Attorney General's office from the district attorney's office in Philadelphia, predominantly because we're told the present DA, Mr. Krasner, had previously represented the Greenberg family and felt there would be a conflict for him to revisit this case.
But the Attorney General is now our governor, Josh Shapiro, the then Attorney General, and he just confirmed the findings previously that it was a suicide, correct?
Well, I can say his office did. I don't think that the present governor, when he was Attorney General, was even personally involved in the investigation or reconsideration, but his office purportedly did an investigation, and it was their determination that it should be affirmed as a suicide and not a homicide.
From what I understand, those in his office that affirmed it as a suicide were the same crew that was with the district attorney's office a few years before. So in other words, when it got to the Attorney General's office, it was reviewed by the same people that concluded it as a suicide to begin with when they were with the district attorney's office, correct?
With just one proviso, Larry, the principal people in charge of the reconsideration of the investigation when it was with the Attorney General's office, yes, they were involved back in 2011 when the case was in Philadelphia. I mean, there were others who would have had no connection in 2011, but quite a few in the AG's office had previously been with the Philadelphia, either DA's office or some other related entity in Philadelphia in 2011.
So, Attorney Podraza, where does it go from here?
Well, that's a very good question. The family, both Sandi and Josh, just want to see justice, and their resolve has been tremendous. We faced a lot of headwinds to date. We've had setbacks, and we've overcome them. I don't see Sandi or Josh backing down just because two judges now have ruled against them, with one judge favoring them. I suspect that they are going to authorize me to go to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court because the issues here are just too important. We're talking beyond just Ellen Greenberg getting justice. We're talking about every citizen in Pennsylvania having the recourse to point out improper conduct by government officials and having a right to have that corrected. Right now, at this point, this opinion as it presently stands would say the citizens don't have a right to, regardless of how outrageous the government officials' conduct has been. That's wrong in our mind. We think that Pennsylvania Supreme Court needs to weigh in, and we're very optimistic that the Supreme Court, if it takes the case, will ultimately straighten this out and give Sandi and Josh recourse to go forward to get justice for Ellen.
And if the Pennsylvania Supreme Court turns you down, then what?
Well, there's recourse a little bit more limited to the United States Supreme Court, but we haven't assessed that yet, Larry. So we're taking this one step at a time. But in addition to that, we have also brought a separate civil lawsuit for money damages against the city of Philadelphia's officials who we contend have acted willfully and conspiratorially to deep six the murder of Ellen Greenberg. We've laid out a very detailed complaint as to our bases for our position, and we are going forward full bore in discovery to get as much materials as possible so that we can hopefully someday be before a jury and let a jury decide whether we're right or wrong.
Yeah, that separate filing, you're actually charging a number of officials with a conspiracy to cover up a murder, correct?
That is correct.
Strong words, strong accusations.
And not taken lightly. But what we have uncovered, as far as I'm concerned, more than legitimize that allegation. And we feel at present we have strong enough proof to get to a jury. And we think that with more digging, we're going to find more support for our position. But let me say this to you. We did not just simply jump into this without strong considerations and strong belief, but more importantly, without strong support. We have all three of those.
Who are the officials that you're accusing of a conspiracy to cover up a murder?
Some are known and some are unknown. At present, we have sued Drs. Galino, Dr. Emery, and Dr. Osborne.
Excuse me, Joe, while you're enumerating these, explain what their positions are for the people.
Sure. We have brought the lawsuit against personnel in the medical examiner's office who were involved in the decision to change Ellen's death or manner of death from homicide to suicide. They include Dr. Osborne, who was the original pathologist who did the autopsy on Ellen, his chief supervisor, Dr. Galino, and then another pathologist by the name of Dr. Emery, who did a review of a specimen, a portion of the spinal column that was preserved after autopsy. This review by Dr. Emery was done in 2019, and that review revealed that the two stab wounds that were preserved, the one through what we call the dura, the skin that wraps around the spinal column, and the tissue of the spinal column, those two stab wounds, both of those stabs had no hemorrhage. If you take a pin, for instance, and stick it in your finger, what happens? You bleed. Blood comes out. That's what we call a hemorrhage. If you were dead and somebody stuck a pin in your finger, you wouldn't have any blood coming out because your heart isn't pushing anymore. It means you're dead. And what the absence of hemorrhage, which was specifically said by Dr. Emery when she was with the medical examiner's office, in her opinion, strongly meant that Ellen was dead when at least those wounds to the back of her neck were administered. Now think about this, Larry. If Ellen was dead for those wounds, the knife is ultimately found in her chest. So assuming that the sequence of stabbing was that the one in her neck and then it went to her chest, she would have had to have stabbed herself twice when she was dead, according to the findings by the medical examiner's office. That is, by all accounts, impossible. Yet they still won't change the death certificate from suicide to something else to allow an investigation into this case.
Now, why is Dr. Emery accused of a conspiracy if she's the one who found those anomalies?
Well, she reported it, and she also owes an independent duty as a employee pathologist for the city to make sure that the determinations in the death certificate are accurate and truthful. And it is not, it's like going back to World War II when, the claim was made I was just following orders. That doesn't work in our system of government of checks and balances. When you are aware of material information that changes what is being presented to the public and you don't speak up, well, you are just as culpable as if you were actively involved in suppressing the truth.
Attorney Podraza, a lot of people may be asking themselves, how much of this was just sheer incompetence, lackadaisical effort, and how much of it was an active intent to conspire to cover up a murder? Was it just sloppy work and, who cares? Or was it an active, purposeful, intentional cover-up?
Well, let me answer it this way, Larry. Let's imagine a continuum, meaning that we start from point A and then we go to point B, and there's a distance in between A and B. Maybe initially there was just complete sloppiness, as you pointed out, and just poor service. But it comes to a point as you go down that continuum where information is brought to your attention that you are now being made aware of to clean up your sloppiness, and yet you refuse to clean up your sloppiness. That's when it begins to suggest to me, at a minimum, that there is intentional actions here to effectuate a result that everybody knows is wrong, but we're nevertheless going to do it. I think we have gone down that continuum far enough, showing enough information that even this court today, if you read the opinions, both opinions, as far as I'm concerned, all three judges feel that this is a homicide murder. We have been presenting that evidence to the city of Philadelphia and its officials for the last 2.5 to 3 years without any reaction, without any recourse, without them reconsidering and doing the right thing. I think there's more to it than just simply sloppiness that somebody might suggest earlier.
Is it a matter now that people just don't want to admit their mistakes, or is there something more? There have been a number of suggestions that there were political political connections and relationships, and maybe even donations to some of the officials involved in the investigation.
Well, I don't know anything about any political contributions, et cetera. So I don't know, and I don't know for a fact what is motivating people. What I do know is there is more than enough information, as even the opinions today say, to conclude that this is a murder and not a suicide. And for whatever reason, folks are resisting it. Now, I'll point out, Larry, Dr. Galino is no longer at the medical examiner's office. Dr. Osborne is no longer at the medical examiner's office. Dr. Emery is no longer at the medical examiner's office. One would think that they have no incentive then to do anything but what would be right. So the fact that they still resist changing this death certificate from suicide to something else so an investigation can go forward strongly suggests that there's something in the background, as far as I'm concerned, that is keeping them from doing the right thing.
Would you care to be more specific what that something might be?
I don't want to speculate. We've, from the very beginning, have said that we will let the facts take us to what the truth is, because conjecture and speculation is just that. It's not proof, it's not evidence. And we don't want to mischaracterize or harm people who ought not to be subjected to that.
No, this has been one blow after another for the Greenbergs, for yourself. Brick wall every step of the way. Have you lost confidence that you will finally prevail? The truth will finally prevail with the system that we have currently in Pennsylvania.
Well, if I felt that way, Larry, I would stop practicing law. And law is a rough and tumble business. And you need to have the fortitude and the belief to see it through to the end. I am of the faith that we will prevail ultimately. And I do believe that we will get to the truth of what happened with Ellen, even if it's an ugly story that will open up other wounds in Philadelphia, meaning other investigations as to other people who may have been subjected to similar misconduct. Let's put it that way. So I'm very optimistic, and I do believe the system will correct itself. This was a setback, but it's not the end of the road. It's just, again, a bump. We've handled them before, and I have every belief that we'll handle this one too.
Attorney Joe Podraza, thanks very much for your explanation of the current state of your pursuit of justice for Ellen Greenberg's family and all the work that you put into it over the years. So, to be continued. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Larry, for the opportunity to speak with you and whoever views this session.